Well, hey, thanks for checking out Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore. I really appreciate you listening. Today, we are going to talk about how to organize special teams. I love special teams. I started this love for special teams back in 1995, coaching a little JV football in San Diego County. And I've been a special teams coordinator at the high school level for 13 years and at the junior college level for one season, last season. I'm really excited to share some insight that I've learned over the years with special teams. So thanks for joining.
You are listening to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore, a place for all coaches to call home. The Coach's Locker Podcast is a part of the Football Coaching Podcast Network. Please visit footballcoachingpodcast.com to hear and see our entire lineup of top football coaches coming to you every single podcast with valuable information to help you and your program. The Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore exists to help prepare coaches to be hired for the job of their dreams and to provide coaches with dynamite resources to become even more successful in their field. You can reach me on Twitter at Coach Fore, that's at COACHFORE, and my podcast home is at 8laces.org/podcast. That's 8laces, EIGHTLACES.org/podcast. Welcome to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore. Now, let's get after it.
So without a doubt, if you want to make a difference with special teams, you're going to have to really be organized with special teams, especially at the high school level. As I said on the intro here, I've been doing this, I think, 13 years. I started my career as a special teams coordinator my second year of coaching football. I was a JV coach at Fallbrook High School down in San Diego County. Fallbrook is where I went to school and just, I grew up in a small town where football really was king when I was growing up in the 80s down there. And, one of those deals, I remember very clearly one day being 7 or 8 years old. I've told him this story a few different times, but 7 or 8 years old, seeing our head football coach at the grocery store and freaking out, what 7 or 8 year old is that in tune to, hey, there's our head football coach at the high school. There he is. So anyway, that's the environment I grew up in. Real great football, small town. Everybody goes Friday night. Kind of very unique. Fallbrook is, if you know anything about San Diego County football, there, back then we were Division I for a long, long time in Fallbrook. I mean, forever until maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe they started kind of slipping in a lot of ways there. It's a long story. I'm not going to get into that, but they're just not having a lot of success right now. But I started there. I was coaching football in 95, 20 years old, and the head coach assigned me 1 or 2 special teams. I think kickoff and kick return, and I loved it. And then a couple weeks into summer, he's like, hey, why don't you take over all the special teams? Would you like to do that? And I think for those guys, these were some guys I had played for, It was a way for them to just dish off the special teams. But that's cool. I took over, and I really loved it. It gave me ownership of something at a young age to oversee and to kind of cut my teeth on that kind of leadership needed to organize all those different units. So that's what I did. And then fast forward, I kind of stopped coaching when I moved away to college. I stopped coaching and then got back into it 2001, and I was coaching at a private school called Linfield Christian. Went there to teach and coach, and took over all those special teams in my second year, 2002. So my first year I coached a few of them, and then my second year the head coach asked me to to coordinate all of special teams. So then in 2003 became the head coach there, and I continued. And so as 8 years as the head coach, I also continued as a special teams coordinator. So if you're a head coach listening, there's no better way to get all of your guys on board with special teams being important than the head coach taking over special teams, or at least playing a key role. So I've worked for, different head coaches over the years, and some of them have been tremendous with special teams, and I had all the support I needed as the guy coordinating them all. And when I say that, because some of you head coaches are like, well, what does that mean? That means that you give your special teams coordinator time. You give him time, and we're going to get into time here in a few minutes, but give him the time that he needs. Don't just throw, hey, you got 10 minutes, say 15. Communicate about that time. You don't want to give him too much. You don't want to give him too little. And then personnel, head coaches, and again, we'll get into this, but the head coach can support his special teams coordinator by helping him to get some real football players on the special teams, not just leftovers. And then also, there's two different ways, and again, we'll get into this, but there's two different ways the head coach can approach special teams. Okay, he can be actively involved, or he could be actively not involved. Actively involved or actively not involved. And what I mean by actively not involved is when the head coach is standing on the sidelines BSing with, 3 or 4 other coaches, that's actively not involved. And then that's also taking away other coaches, some of those guys who might be assigned to coach a unit that's being worked on. But, hey, the head coach isn't doing it, so I'm not going to do it. Head coach doesn't really care about special teams, so I'm not going to really care either. That's the mentality that I've seen in different programs, and, that's a big no-no if you want to really have success with special teams. Centennial High School here in Corona, one of the top high schools in the nation. Every single year when you look on Max Preps, they're usually in the top 10 in the entire nation, usually, in the top 2 or 3 in California. Coach Logan there, Matt Logan, has developed and ran a dynamite program there for a long time, and he had me in a couple years ago. One of his assistants saw me speak at a Glazier clinic about special teams, and part of it was this talk I'm doing today on special teams organization for you. And he told Matt, hey, you got to bring this guy in. And so Matt contacted me, and I went down and did a talk for them at Corona Centennial on special teams organization. And I was so impressed with Coach Logan, because he was sitting right there in the front row with pencil and paper, taking more notes than just about anybody in that room. And that's not a real indictment on anybody else in that room. He had his entire staff there. Some of those guys were assigned just to one thing. Maybe they knew, hey, I'm on the PAT team, so they don't necessarily need to be taking notes on kickoff. That makes sense. So, but Coach Logan was in the front row asking more questions than anybody else in the room, turning around, talking to his coaches about different aspects or ideas I brought up. And so, man, that was impressive. And I walked away from there going, man, special teams is important at this school because of how the head coach, takes that. So, and again, we'll get into that in a few minutes. But when you bring organization and organizational mentality to special teams at the high school level, I think you can really, and at, no matter the level really, but specifically down at the high school level, I think you can really make a difference just by being highly organized. And, using statistical analysis is something I really like to do. Being able to really break things down, find out what are you doing well, what are you doing not well. By statistics, I think is a really big idea. And I'm going to put some things into the show notes. Let me talk about that for a second. If you go to 8laces.org/podcast, 8laces.org/podcast, that's where my show notes are always going to be. And you just click on whichever show you're interested in seeing those notes. Sometimes we'll have quite a few links and show notes there, and then sometimes, there won't be. But on this one specifically, I'm going to link to a whole bunch of stuff I've written on special teams. I'll link to the kind of the PowerPoint I'm using for this, discussion. I'll show you that as well. And it might help you actually if you open up that PowerPoint and you can kind of, go through that as I'm talking here through it if you'd like. That might work for you. So take a second, pause this, go open up that PowerPoint again, 8laces.org, 8laces.org/podcast if you want to do that for all the show notes, not only this show, but in the future, etc. So one of the things I did was when I took over at Sultana High School, that's where I'm a teacher now, a special ed teacher. In 2015, I took over there, and I broke down and looked at I charted every single kick from 2014. One of the things I wanted to do was just to see, hey, what are these guys doing well? If there's things they're doing really well, I'm not going to change. What are things that need help, And so I charted every single kick, and I've done that a few times. I've taken over as a special teams coordinator. And one of them is just to get one of the reasons is just to get it all on paper. And I think that you can use those stats to show the kids and just really pump them up like, hey, man, look at what we're doing this year. And you get their buy-in from putting in a little more time into special teams. So, for instance, and if you are following along here, I'm on slide 4, what a difference a year makes. In 2014, they started after kickoffs, they started on the 24-yard line. In 15, we increased that to the 29.4. So that's every single kick, okay? So let's say there's 4 kickoffs in a game each way. Let's just say there's 4 kickoffs each way, okay? If you're starting at 5 yards better each kickoff, there's 20 yards, okay? Special teams, guys, is all about that hidden yardage, right? It's all about that field position. So right there, we just gained 20 yards on our kickoffs, just increasing each kick return 5 yards. And then you look at the opponent, okay, on this one here. The opponent average start after kickoffs in 2014, they started at the 29-yard on average. And in 2015, we started them on the 24-yard line. So there's 5 yards. So again, let's just say there's 4 kickoffs. We kick off 4 times to them. So then now that's, 5-yard difference. That's 20 yards. So we have increased our yardage by 20. We have decreased their yardage by 20. That's a huge difference. Okay. So I think that that's one thing I like to do, taking over a new program. You look at our opponent punt return yards, they allowed 15.8 return yards in 2014. So every time they punted, they allowed 15 yards. And then, of course, we put in the shield punt. Shield punt, something I've been doing for a long time. I wrote a book on the shield punt, available on my website, 8laces.org. Mentor and disciple teams on the shield punt all over the nation. In fact, I'm doing this podcast right now from a hotel in San Diego. I just met with a staff on 2 days ago, on Friday. Met with a staff on the shield punt for 2 hours. So it's something I love. I really encourage you to check out the shield punt. And that year we put it in 2015, our opponent averaged just 2.3 yards a return attempt. So there we decreased their yardage by 13.5 yards a punt every single time we punted. So what, you're going to punt, 5, 6, 7 times a game. You're taking away 13 yards every time. So let's say you punted 5 times a game. You're taking away 65 yards, I think. I don't know. I'm not very good at math. But you're taking away, that's a ton of yardage, folks. So, again, this is just a way to start organizing your special teams in a way that you can see the differences that you're making. At Oak Hills High School, I took over there in 2014. So I was only at Oak Hills for 1 year. And then my special ed teaching position, 3 of us, the last 3 hired, had to find other jobs. We were overstaffed, so then I moved over to Sultana. But in 2014, when I took over, look at this. Our opponents were a lot harder in 14 than 13, according to Cal Preps. But here's a great one that I love. we decreased punt return yardage by 85%, putting in the shield punt at Oak Hills in 2014. We decreased punt return yardage by 85%. I mean, that's huge. You look at us on average start after punt return. We started on the average in 2013 before I was there at the 34.48. In 14, we started on the average of the 45. So we increased that by almost 11 yards every return. That's an entire first down every return with our punt returns. I'm a big believer. I use man scheme punt returns. And so we increased that by 31%. So that's huge. That's huge when you're able to do that. So again, looking at statistical analysis, I break down stats every single week. And again, we'll have some of that stuff for you in the show notes. So you need to determine, one of the big keys here is to determine the best philosophy for your program. It's not take my philosophy. It's not take the philosophy of some guy you hear at a clinic. It's really to determine what is the best philosophy for special teams for your program. Because what I've found over the years in this coaching world is we hear something, we see a video, we read a book, we go to a clinic, and then, especially I did this as a young head coach, we try to jam that philosophy into our programs. And a lot of times it doesn't work because it's not really our philosophy. It's somebody else's philosophy. We're trying to jam in. So you need to determine what's best for your program. And I really believe, your special teams, it's like I'm in San Diego right now. I love it down here. But San Diego is known for Mexican food. Great Mexican food down here, right? And if you look at a carne asada burrito, there's so many ways to make a carne asada burrito. And, you can put a lot of red sauce and cheese on that thing afterwards. I don't like that. It's called a wet burrito. I don't like that. I like mine dry, no sauce on it. Okay, but inside you want, I like meat, cheese, onions, salsa, tomatoes. Some people, I got a son, he likes just meat and cheese, so there's 1,000 different ways to make a carne asada burrito, present that burrito. It's the same thing for your special teams, okay? You got to determine what's best for your program. And one of those things you'll need to decide, I think the real key you're going to have to decide is in the area of time. And the way I explain this to guys is your special teams periods in the spring, in the summer, during the year, during the actual season, you can either, and this is kind of a big thing that guys have said, oh man, that makes a lot of sense. But the time spent, okay, you can either use a stopwatch to determine your time spent, or you can use a sand timer to determine that time spent during your special teams period. What do I mean by that? A stopwatch or sand timer. The sand timer, you've seen the pictures of them. Again, if you download the PowerPoint, you can be looking at it right now. But the sand timer has the sands of time come through that thing. There's a big globe, a big ball looking thing with all the sand in it. You turn it over, that sand starts falling out one at a time, right? So, and I think, obviously, the 15 minutes on the stopwatch or the 15 minutes on the sand timer, it's the same 15 minutes, right? But the difference is this. It's your philosophy as a whole on spending time with special teams. The stopwatch, you use the stopwatch to see how fast you can get something done, right? You use a sand timer in a totally different way. That you're not timing how fast you can get something done. It's like, hey, we've got 15 minutes. Because there's some coaches I've worked for, they've been like, hey, how fast can you get this done today? Well, that means we don't carry that philosophy to offense. We don't carry that philosophy to special teams, okay? But it's like, oh, how much time do you need? Well, I need 20 minutes. Can you do 10? That's a stopwatch mentality. And so that's one of the first questions really ask yourself about the organization of your special teams is, what's our mentality with time? Is it a stopwatch? Are we just getting it done as fast as we can to get it done, say we got it done? Or is it a sand timer? Okay. where your philosophy is a lot different. It's like, hey, how much can we get out of this 15 minutes we have? So those are real big differences. I mean, there's a lot of programs out there at the high school level. They roll the ball out on Thursday. they roll the ball out like a PE teacher, and hey, let's go see how we can throw together our special teams today. Folks, you're not going to have a very great success if you just roll the ball out on Thursday and run through your special teams like a freshman team does. Get off the bus, let's get 11 guys will be on kickoff. It's amazing to me there's varsity teams that do that. I saw a very, very good program this year. I was really surprised at what I saw from them before the game, special teams wise. I was there just watching a game and kind of scouting kids. I coached this past season, 2017, at a junior college, so we were there doing a little recruiting. And, it's a very good program here in Southern California. Obviously, I'm not going to name it, but before the game, it was like I was watching them on the field, and man, they were very disorganized special teams wise. And although they won that night, they definitely lost the special teams battle. The team they played was way more prepared special teams wise. But they're who's on kickoff, who's on punt. It was a disaster before the game. We're talking 45 minutes before the game. But hey, I think what happens is you're real talented. You have a lot of success, offensive, defense. You can hide those things. You can hide being unorganized that way. But, once some of those kids leave, or you're not recruiting the better kids in, or what have you, once you are losing, you're going to sit down and go on, okay, we need to take more pride in special teams. We need to do a better job in special teams. That's usually what happens. It's at the end of a bad season. This past year, for instance, I run shieldpunt.com. Again, I've written a whole lot on it, and I've been using the shield punt since 2002. So I had a coach from a Division I school, NCAA Division I FCS, an FCS school, contact me about the shield punt. And he said, hey, Chris, we had 3 punts blocked this year and allowed 2 touchdowns on our punt team. It's awful. We're going to put in the shield punt. I need you to help me. And I said, man, I kind of laughed. I said, Coach, I hate to tell you this, but we've had 3 punts blocked since 2002 using the shield punt. So, and that's true. We had one blocked in 2002, our first year using it. We had one blocked in 2007, and then we had one blocked in 2014. So shield punt's a great system, to minimize those blocks. But anyway, it's when you've had a really bad season where guys go, okay, we need to change something on special teams. So instead of waiting to that bad season, have these discussions with your staff now. The other thing, part of the philosophy you're going to have to decide is, and I put this on Twitter maybe, I don't know, a year and a half ago or so, and I like these people, these people respond negatively, and, oh, you should never say that about a kid, and, man, get over it. Relax. Some people take life so seriously. But here's the idea, philosophy, personnel-wise. Are you going to use thoroughbreds or are you going to use donkeys? Right? I mean, that makes a big difference. And again, I got a picture on this PowerPoint I use for this talk. And it's got a big, sexy thoroughbred, strong thoroughbred there. Racehorse. Thoroughbreds are racehorses, man. They're big, strong. The more physical kids on your team. And then there's a donkey there, and there's, a picture of this donkey with his teeth and open and smiling. And you have to make a decision. And it's a big decision to make. And I think you got to make the decision going into the year. Are we going to use thoroughbreds or are we going to use donkeys? This program I told you about, I just met with 2 days ago to talk about the shield punt. I said, what kind of, he asked, hey, the head coach asked, what kind of guys you like having on that front line 7, those front guys going down chasing the ball carrier on your punt team. And I said, well, I like, safeties and linebackers. That's who's got to play there. And he and his staff started talking about some kids. And I said, what are these first stringers, second stringers, what starters, what are they? And he said, oh, Coach, the only kid who doesn't play special teams in our program is a quarterback. So there you go. Those guys, they use thoroughbreds. That's what you got to do if you want to have a big, influence and have special teams be impactful. This idea of, putting backups out there and saving kids, I mean, I get it. Again, I've been a head coach. I've been a head coach with 20 kids on my team. I understand, you don't want to get a kid hurt. A few years ago, we got a kid hurt at Sultana on a kick return. We had one kid missed a block, and our ball carrier had a torn ACL. I felt horrible for the kid, man. I felt absolutely horrible. His season was ended on a kick return. Again, one of our best athletes, another athlete missed an assignment. And unfortunately, cost that kid his ACL. Now, it's not saying, it could have happened some other way in that same game on that same play. I don't know. But, decision we made was we want our best kids back there returning kicks. So that's a philosophy discussion you're going to have. You want thoroughbreds, you want donkeys out there, okay? Another philosophy you're going to have, and on this slide I have a picture of a $100 bill and a picture of a $1 bill. What is the investment? The investment of your coaching staff, what is the investment of your coaching staff going to be? Is it a $100 bill or a $1 bill? Now, I've been a part of a staff where they say, Chris, every one of our coaches is going to be involved in special teams, and I put it all down on paper. I assign each guy a different unit. Most of the coaches are assigned to 2 or 3 different special teams. And, we try to break that down, match up best position group they're coaching with the special team that those kids are on. And it all looks great on paper. And then you go out there and every coach is just standing on the sideline BSing. I've been part of programs where every one of those coaches is coaching their tail off. And you know how that story ends. The programs where every coach is involved in doing something, those special teams are better than the special teams where you got 1 or 2 or maybe 3 guys out there coaching and everybody else is standing around. So if guys are standing around during special teams, coaches are doing that, and the head coach accepts it, then you're only going to get your special teams so far. Leadership guru John Maxwell talks about this law of leadership. I think he has 21 laws of leadership, and one of them is called the law of the lid. The law of the lid. And the law of the lid says that every single leader out there, every single leader has a lid to their leadership. Like, they can't lead, and he always uses his hands to show this, and he'll put one hand up and he'll say, this is the leadership, the law of the lid. This leader, let's say his name is Chris, his leadership capability is here, okay? And he'll put that, he'll put his hand up at a certain spot. And then he'll take his other hand and say, Chris will never be able to lead that group. And then he'll take his hand and put it, above the hand that he put stationary. You'll never be able to lead your group higher than your lid is, okay? And that's the same thing with special teams. If your head coach has a very low lid on special teams philosophy, that special teams coordinator, he'll never be able to take special teams past what his head coach believes. I really, really believe that. So the coach's investment, is it a $1 bill or is it a $100 bill? Does the investment hurt a little bit, okay, or is it an easy thing? So again, those 3 philosophical keys right there, I think are real big ideas. Okay, the time spent, the kids on the field, and then the coach's investment. Those 3 pieces of philosophy. I mean, that's not X and O stuff. That's just philosophy. Time spent, okay, the investment, and the kids on the field. Those are 3 really major discussions that your program has got to figure out. And I think that if you don't do a very good job of having those discussions and figuring out what, who is going to lead what, and you don't do a very good job of figuring out what your philosophy is there, you're going to end up frustrated, I think. You're going to end up having special teams that aren't very dynamic. And so right now is the time. Right now, this summer, this is time to have those talks if you haven't already. Let's talk about how to structure 12 months of special teams. In January and February, honestly, there's really nothing going on special teams wise, that I've ever done that early. March and April, and this is a very quick cursory overview of 12 months. March, April, you're going to spend those months reviewing last season, breaking down last season, real in-depth through huddle, through statistical analysis. March and April, spend time doing those things. And then May, June, you're going to be installing out at spring camp. You're going to be and then start of summer, you're going to be, teaching in anything new, installing anything new, and then just starting back at square one. You've got all your seniors are gone now, so you've got definitely personnel changes. So you're going to start in May. You're going to start working on that, that depth chart for all of your 6 different special teams. There's so many moving pieces to special teams with, you got kickoff and kick return, you got punt return, you got PAT block. So you got 6 special teams there, plus you throw together a hands unit. That's 7, that's kick return hands unit. 7 different special teams. You're looking at 77 spots. Those are just starters. So, one key to organizing all that is getting it all down on paper, starting in May, getting it all down on paper with the depth chart, just like you do with the offense and defense. You can also do that with special teams. I'll put up in the show notes, different special teams depth charts that I've used over the years. The one I really like that I've really finally settled on, and it probably took me 10 or 11 years, it's where my depth chart is, it's me in the huddle looking at the kids. So, or my kickoff team lined up facing me. I don't know if that makes much sense on the radio here, but on paper, on my Excel spreadsheet, okay, it's the kids. If you think about this, okay, think about out on the field, what I call R1. He's to the right of the kicker. Okay, he's to the right of the kicker. R2, R3, R4, R5. R5 would be the kid right to the right of the kicker if the kicker's right in the middle. If you've got 5 kids, kicker, 5 kids, R1 is on the sideline. R5 is right next to him. And then on the other side, obviously, L5 right next to him, L1 over on that left sideline. That's kind of how I number those guys. And so on my spreadsheet, you'll see R1 is really on the left-hand side of my spreadsheet, because when they line up on the field, or in my huddle, okay, and I'm missing the third guy from my left, that's really called R3. Again, this is a little confusing here, but you'll see it on the show notes, what my depth chart looks like, okay? So before I used to have my depth chart so that it showed like how they were on the field going down the field, right? But then I always had to, maybe I'm the only idiot who's had this mistake, but I always had to flip that around for special teams, just, this guy's missing. I'd turn it upside down. So anyway, I came to finally a really good depth chart that I like. And again, it's when I'm looking at the team, how they look there, not how they look going down the field. But that's been most beneficial to me, is that kind of a depth chart. And so get that thing going in May. And so you're in May and June, you're reviewing, you're installing. And then, July, you're going full speed in July so that you're not putting stuff in. And then obviously, now, this calendar is changing a little bit. Out here in this year, 2018, we are going to have 3 high school games done by Labor Day, which is just crazy to me. We're going to have 3 high school games done by Labor Day. Last night, I'm at the California Coaches Association dinner. I'm on the board for the California Coaches Association. And last night at our annual awards dinner, I was speaking with Herb Meyer, who's a legend. He's number 4 on the coach wins in California history. He spent, I think, 25 years at El Camino High School down here in San Diego. And then another guy, John Carroll, who, yes, I'm name dropping. John Carroll, Oceanside High. These guys are 2 of the best coaches in California history. And they were there at our dinner last night. And I went over, said hello. I've met Coach Meyer before a few times. And so anytime I can say hi and talk to guys like that, I take advantage of it. And so I was talking to these 2 legends, and we were talking about that. We were talking about the calendar and how, Coach Meyer said, dang, Chris, back in the 80s, we didn't even get the kids together until like a week before Labor Day. So, and again, the concept came up because we were talking about these guys, again, both spent, 25 plus years at the same high school, which is so rare these days. One of the guys we honored last night, Coach Lou Fore from Charter Oak, he just celebrated his 50th year at Charter Oak High School. I mean, I can't even fathom that, honestly. I'm 42 years old. He's been at that high school for 8 years longer than I've been alive. So it is fascinating. He's been at the same school for 50 years. But that's kind of the genesis of we were talking about how, it's crazy what the football calendar is doing here in California. I don't know about where you're from. But anyway, back to this. So obviously now in August, you better be going full speed. But I really like to have everything installed. When I was a head coach, I don't want to teach anything during training camp. I don't want to teach any special teams during training camp. We want to be full go during training camp so that we're getting as many full speed reps as possible. So that's really what my goal was as a head coach, special teams wise, is we're teaching that. We got our depth charts going, and we're full speed. We're not having to teach hardly anything special teams wise during training camp. It's great if you can get your program to that point. And obviously September, October, November, December, you're going to be in the throes of your season, hopefully into December. Structuring time during training camp itself. Again, if you pull up the PowerPoint, I've got on here 2000, and this would be from 2016 season. You'll see the Sultana football special teams installation calendar. And so check that out. You'll see exactly how I coordinate our special teams installation. And although I just said, we want to have everything installed, ready to go, not having to teach much, it's still, I still call it the installation calendar. Although we've got most of these things dialed in, we're going to back up a little bit. And that first week of training camp, if I have a 15-minute or a 20-minute period each day, okay, I'm going to spend that entire time just on that one unit. So just to kind of, regather our steps. Usually out here, like at Sultana this year that I'm talking about, where you see this calendar from a few years ago, what we had was we did our dead period. So that's 3 weeks where you can't be on the field at all. 3 weeks you can't be on the field. You can just have the kids lift and run. Okay, those were right before this July 27th. So we started on July 27th with punt team, and so we did only that one team for about 15 or 20 minutes. I can't remember. I think it was probably a 15-minute period. And so the first day of our fall camp, it's 15 minutes on punt. And again, we haven't had them on the field in 3 weeks. So it's kind of going through that. It's walking through it to remind them for the first 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes of running through it, And when I say running through that, I'm going to run through that with try really hard to get a two deep depth chart at least, and then some third teamers if your program's that big. If you have 3 teams, that's great. And then, that'll narrow down during the course of training camp. But that first week of training camp, we did 15 minutes a day, punt return the next day, then kick off, then kick return. So again, kind of going through things a little slower that first week of camp, but then, I'm trying to get as many reps as I can, but spending a few minutes just reviewing each of those, what our philosophy is and that sort of thing, again, because we hadn't seen them in 3 weeks. If I've seen them, if I've been practicing with them those 3 weeks leading up to it, some coaches put I know Coach Fore last night, we were talking about that, like where do you place your dead period? He just finished his, today's June 17th, so he just finished his dead period. He put it, towards the beginning of their summer, and so they'll hit the ground running, into training camp. And so if we do that, I don't do just one special team a day there. I would do 2. So, but then the second week here, we're going to go 2 punt return, we're going to do 2 special teams each day that second week of camp. And so we'll go punt return, kickoff, kick return, punt return, kickoff, kick return. That's kind of how my second week of camp looked. And this is no 2 a day, so just 1 practice a day. 1 practice a day during camp, okay? So that second week we'll do 2 each day. And then the third week, again, we'll do 2 each day. When I put this calendar together, what I do is that third week, the third week of installation, it will say on Friday, because we went Monday through Friday on that third week. On Friday, it just says TBD. And then the fourth week of camp leading into our scrimmage, because what we do, we'll have 3 weeks of camp, and then we'll have a week of practice before a scrimmage. That scrimmage week, I'll put on Wednesday and Thursday my 2 time periods, my 2 slots for special teams. I just have to be determined. Obviously, I put this calendar together probably in like April, May, for what our August special teams calendar looks like. I'm not going to schedule out every one of those days. I'm going to leave some to be determined because, maybe our kick return is just having an awful time. We're just not looking very good. So on that, that 4th week of camp before our scrimmage there, that 4th week, Wednesday, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? We need a lot more time on our kick return. So let's do this kick return on Tuesday, and then let's also throw it into one of these to be determined slots on Wednesday. And you know what? We're also going to throw it in the to be determined slot on Thursday. So that's a decision I'm not going to make until we're there. And then, so again, just real important, I think, to put together a good calendar here. On this special teams installation calendar, you will also see on the bottom of it, which coaches are coaching which things. You'll see all the names there. So, for instance, on kick return, I've got myself, Fore, obviously on every one of them. Fore, Booth Sr. on kick return, Coach Obi, and then Coach Gomez. So if I remember right, kind of the way we divide that kick return up is not like, hey, you got the front line, you got the back line, you got the returners. I'll kind of line them up where one coach can stand on one sideline and watch, like 4 or 5 kids to his sideline. So those might be guys on the first line and the second line, and then other coaches on the other sideline watching those 4 or 5 kids closest to him. So that's kind of how I split those up. And then I'll have a guy coaching specifically the returners. In this instance here, it was Coach Gomez. So I use 4 on kick return. I think you can, use 3 minimum. But I like to be able to, scheme up kick returns and be able to coach all of it. So I stand behind the whole thing, back kind of by the returners, and watch the whole thing unfold. That's how I like to coach kick return. And then, more of the big picture thing. And then those 3 assistants I have coaching that thing with me, obviously the kick return coach, the returners coach, he's going to coach those, those 2 returners back there. And then my other 2 assistants are going to be on the sidelines kind of, coaching either 4 or 5 guys. Obviously you've got 9 left, so one of those guys will coach 4 up, one of them will coach 5 up. Okay, so that's kind of how I split up that specific unit. And that's a little bit about our installation calendar, okay? Now, when you're actually into the game week itself, okay? When you're into the game week itself, here's how I like to progress through our game week, okay? And that is having on Mondays, that's when I'll put in usually our punt returns and kick returns. And then if I have a punt fake, and then if we have an onside kick we really like, based on what we see on film, okay? Punt return, kick return, punt fake, onside kick. So I'm going to be doing another podcast on special teams in the future on more the game planning part of it. This one's more, philosophical organization, so I'm not going to get too big into that. But on punt return, my punt and kick returns, those are the ones I really, really love coaching. I love being able to scheme those up for each game we're looking at. Okay, we scheme those up for each opponent, and so those take time. Obviously, you've got to. We'll walk through on Mondays. We will walk through a new punt return we're putting in 5 or 6 times. We'll jog through it 3 or 4 times, and we'll usually go through it full speed, 1 or 2 times on Monday. And then same with our kick return. We'll walk through that bad boy 4 or 5, 6 times. We'll jog through it 3 or 4 times, and then we'll do 1 or 2, full speed as we're teaching something brand new, some type of new punt return. So that's Mondays. We'll do punt return, kick return, and then also spend maybe 5 minutes. And so time-wise there, I'm looking at maybe 7 or 8 minutes each of those. My Mondays are my heaviest days, special teams-wise, on Monday, okay, because we're installing some stuff. And then if there's a punt fake we really like, again, that's based on what we see on film. We'll put in a punt fake maybe on Monday. And then also if there's an onside kick, maybe we really like a kick towards a certain kid, or we see they have a, vacated opening, or a pooch kick we really like. We'll walk through that for maybe 5 or 6 minutes as well. So that's Mondays: punt return, kick return, punt fake, or onside kick. Obviously, if we don't have an onside kick or punt fake we really like that week, then we're not going to spend time on those at all. And then we'll just spend our time doing our 2 returns. On Tuesdays of game week, usually we're going to go kickoff, punt, PAT. So again, kickoff, you're looking at 7 or 8 minutes on kickoff, 7 or 8 minutes on punt, 7 or 8 minutes on PAT. That's Tuesdays. On and our kickoff and punt, those things don't change too much. So by like weeks 5 and 6, 7, after that, we usually play 5 games, have a bye, 5 games. After the bye, we come back. It's usually 5 minutes on kickoff, 5 minutes on punt, so that 5 minutes on PAT. So, but that's usually Tuesdays: kickoff, punt, and PAT. On Wednesdays, we're going to come back to our punt return and kick return on Wednesday. We're going to come back, put those, put the finishing touches on those, maybe some things we didn't like, or, I really don't like to be coaching. I don't like to be teaching too much new stuff on Wednesday at all by any means, but maybe there's an adjustment we have to make that didn't work on Monday. We'll fine-tune that. But, again, I like to go 7 or 8, 10 minutes on each of those, punt return and kick return on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, I stole a script somewhere years ago, and the last 2 head coaches, actually the last 3 head coaches I worked for here at the junior college, we did the same type of deal. It's going through, a game. So we'll roll the ball out there, kickoff. Okay, it's like about a 30-minute script we go through. A 30-minute script we go through on Thursdays, where we're, that's game speed. We're reviewing every special team, getting the kids all on and off, and that's a really good thing. Last year, I picked up a great idea. The head coach I worked for here at Victor Valley College, on Thursdays, we would start Thursday practice with, the kickoff team was out there, for instance, right? And they're lined up just like they are on the field. And then we would go through, we'd call each kid off, and then his backup better jump out there. And, then we'd bring out the kick return team. Again, whole kick return team's out there. I'd call each kid, all of the 11 kids, Garcia, Rodriguez, Smith, Ford, Jones. As I said their name, they jogged off, and their replacement would say his name and jog on. Okay? So, again, line up our whole kickoff team out there. They're out there, 11 kids facing you just like they are on the field. And I would start on my far left, and I would, say his name. Garcia, out. And then Jones, let's say Jones backs him up. He would say, Jones in. I'd go to the next kid. Albert, out. Kenny, in. Next kid. Bramer, out. Notoriani, in. So we would do that. And if we got to maybe, let's say the fourth special team, and we didn't have a backup, the backup kid didn't come out, head coach started all over. So we'd go all the way back to the first one. Kickoff was always first. So that was a really good way just to make sure kids were in tune to knowing, who had who's back. And that was a really good process. By week 5 or 6, it was only taking 4 minutes, of our time. So that was a really good way to help organize our backups on that Thursday. Well, for us last year it was Friday, the day before a game. So that's what my game week looks like. My return game on Mondays, along with any fakes. On Tuesdays, kickoff, punt, PAT. On Wednesdays, my return game again, punt and kick return. And then we're going to review all of that through a script on Thursdays. And then obviously you got your game. So that's how we organized our game week. Okay, a really good way to do that. And then let's talk a little bit about, just to wrap this thing up in the next 7 or 8 minutes, evaluating your special teams, in-season special teams evaluation. Again, I really think it's imperative for you to sit down and do some statistical analysis of your teams. And what I put together, and again, if you're looking at this, I'm on slide 31. You'll see I have what I call the Sultana Football Special Teams Review. Okay, week 1, Eisenhower. We won this game 52-14. And so what I have on there is each of our 4, major special teams. Kickoff, it shows, hey, we had 9 kickoffs. The opponent's average start was a 26.4 yard line. We had 4 touchbacks, 1 failed onside kick. Other kicks were to the 16, the 5, the 8, and the 1. 4 returns allowed for average of 23 yards a pop. And then the longest return allowed was 54 yards. The shortest was 9. So obviously I'm going to go and look at that 54-yard return 1,000 times to figure out, what in the world happened on this return. How did we allow 54 yards on this one return? Then I'm going to look at the kick return. It says on here we had 3 kick return plays. Our average start was a 43-yard line, so we love that. We love coming out to the 43-yard line. We gained 12.45 yards per return. We had 2 returns on squib kicks. Longest return we had was 15 yards. The shortest return was 10. So again, I would walk into my staff meeting with all this information down. Guys, it's, I think a lot of times we just evaluate our special teams like, hey, we didn't give up a kickoff. All right, we did pretty good on kickoff. Or, hey, shoot, they brought it out to the 50. It's like those big things that happen during a game. We know those. We see those. The whole stadium sees those. So it's like, oh, kickoff didn't have a very good game. They brought it out to the 50 every time. Okay, well, why did they not? Is it because of, where we're kicking the ball? Is it because of missed tackles? Is it because of a personnel issue? So you really can't get into that stuff unless you spend time, breaking things down statistically. And then, I put together also, you'll see on this PowerPoint, you'll see Sultana Football Week 2. Again, I walk through all those same stats for the coaching staff to see. And then I have down at the bottom, I started doing Week 2 there, a SWOT analysis. I did it Week 1 as well, but just not on that piece of paper. But you'll see here, slide 32, SWOT analysis, and I have a SWOT analysis, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So I said, hey, our strengths right now from this game, our strengths are the punt return team was lights out. So when you look at our punt return team, our average start was a 44-yard line. We had two catchable returns, and they were averaged 35 yards a pop. I mean, that's outstanding. We had returns of 43 and 27 yards. That's tremendous, okay? And so that was a strength. A weakness, missed PATs. We were 2 of 4 on PATs. So obviously we're going to do a little more work that next week on PATs. And then opportunities are kick coverage when kicked to the right place. What opportunities do we have? Well, the opportunities I thought we could, work on and make a little better was our kick coverage was pretty darn good when we kicked it, to the right place that we wanted to kick it. And then what threats are there to our special teams? Again, PAT was poor. We lost 2 points, And then also another threat that from that game was out of bounds kickoffs. So this was a brand new kicker to the game of football, week 2, had some out of bounds kickoffs. That's not good. That's a threat, okay? So that SWOT analysis has always helped me and my staff, do a very good job of looking at what really needs to work on. So on this slide show, this PowerPoint, you'll see scouting your opponent in season. We're going to talk about that on a whole different PowerPoint, I almost said, on a whole different podcast, because this one's getting too long. I really wasn't planning on talking about doing the scouting much. So we're going to get into scouting your opponent on a separate podcast. So we appreciate you taking the time to listen here. Hope you learned a little bit about, special teams organization, how to better prepare yourselves and organize yourself special teams wise. I hope you just, are able to walk away with 2 or 3 things to maybe you heard brand new for the first time on how to organize special teams a little better. This is something I do, just a short commercial, I do help programs with their organization, so if there's any way I can help you, let me know. I do go out and speak to different schools, their entire staffs. I've done that quite a few times on organizing their special teams. Obviously I don't do that for free. My time is valuable. I don't leave my kids and wife for free, but I'm not charging you $1,000 a day or nothing silly like that. But if that's something you're interested in, let me know as well. Or if there's just any questions you have, drop me an email, a DM, and let's talk. See how I can, help answer any questions you might have. So, thanks a lot, folks. That's it. That wraps up episode 4 of the Coach's Locker podcast. Thank you for listening. Hope you learned a little bit about special teams. If you like the show, if you like what we're doing on the podcast, please rate us on iTunes there or wherever you listen. If you would just make sure to drop a couple good stars there. I think you can do up to 5, but if you think it's 5, give it a 5. If you think it's a 1, give it a 1. Any kind of feedback you can give would be really tremendous. It helps us out. Next week on the show, we're going to have Coach Kevin Swift, good friend of mine, athletic director, head football coach at Gold Beach High School in Oregon. He's an old dinosaur. He's an old guy. He says it himself. And Kevin is from down here in Southern California, but moved up to Oregon a long time ago, 22 or so years ago. He's going to talk about we're going to talk a lot about football, leadership, coaching, but also he's going to talk about what's unique to a small school. So if you're in a small school, if your school's, struggling with numbers right now, I think that'll be beneficial for you on next week's podcast. Remember to check out Football Coaching Podcast Network. We've got some really great football coaches on this network. Visit footballcoachingpodcast.com to hear and see our entire lineup of top football coaches. We've got some great ones on footballcoachingpodcast.com. And as always, you can reach me on Twitter at Coach Fore. Show notes and my email, 8laces.org/podcast. You can go there. That's my podcast home. You'll find our show notes, schedule upcoming topics there as well. Until next time, this has been the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore.